Hi, it's Steph, and we're at Lowe's. And they've received a whole new inventory of evergreens and shrubs. There is still lots of fall annuals and even some holiday arrivals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the October inventory at Lowe's. If you're looking to plant a privacy fence or living hedge this fall, they have lots of Arborvitae in stock, and these are great evergreens for this purpose. So the emerald green has a more compact form and grows a bit tighter in habit, and the green giant has a larger growth habit and grows a bit looser in form. They are also different in the terms of deer resistance. So the emerald green is less deer resistant and the green giant is more deer resistant. They both like water, especially when they're newly planted. You want to make sure that you water them well, and any times during drought thereafter, make sure you water them. They really like water. They don't like to sit in water. They like a well-draining soil, but they do like moisture. That is the quickest way to get them to dry out, is by not giving them enough moisture. So the price on these here is $43.98 for a 4.5 gallon, and they like to be planted in full sun. I have a video that I made on my channel with the key differences between the two, as well as real life applications of how they were planted and used as living fences, and I'll link that below if you want to check it out. And some beautiful blue arrow junipers. Now these are not all that common here at the box store garden centers, but they are a beautiful evergreen. They have a nice compact growth habit. They're very columnar in growth habit, and you can see that they have this beautiful blue coloring to them, which is really pretty and makes a nice contrast to all the green in the garden. Now they do like full sun. Anytime that you have a conifer or evergreen that leans blue or yellow, they will have the best color in more sun. And junipers are also pretty drought tolerant. So anytime that you see a plant that is drought tolerant, that just means that when you initially plant it, you do have to keep it watered. Anything that you newly plant does have to be regularly watered. But over time, they need less water to get by and stay happy. And these here are in a number 2.5 gallon container for $44.98. And the blue arrow juniper is hardy down to a zone 3, so very hardy, down to -30 to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. They get to be 15 to 20 feet in height, 3 to 4 feet in width, and they are deer resistant. Here's another really pretty evergreen, and one that I have in my own garden. It is the Fire Chief Arborvitae. And what I like about it is that it gets really beautiful coloring. So in the spring and summer, it will look like this. It'll have a really gorgeous chartreuse limey green coloring. And as we transition to the cooler temperatures of fall and winter, they start going bronze. And you can see the color change is already happening, but these will go completely bronze by winter, and they'll look like this. They'll have an orange hint to them. Now, if you're new to growing this plant, it might look like it's dying, but it's not. It just has really interesting winter color. And so here is the information on the Fire Chief Arborvitae. So this here does like full sun. It gets to be 4 by 4 in height and in width. It grows in a ball shape, has a spherical growth habit, and it is hardy down to a zone 3 or -30 degrees Fahrenheit. I also find it to be pretty deer resistant in my garden. And these here are in a number 2 gallon container for $34.98. Here are some little giant Arborvitaes, and in contrast to the green giant, which grows in a pyramidal form and is much larger, these little giants grow in a round or spherical habit. And what's great about this is that if you want evergreen interest, and say you like a ball-shaped shrub like a boxwood, boxwood would require trimming in order to keep that shape, where these naturally grow in a rounded shape. So let me show you the information on the little giant Arborvitae. You can see here in the photo how it grows. It also likes full sun. This is in a number 2 gallon container for $29.98, and it is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit or down to a zone 3. Now, like the green giant Arborvitae, the little giant also tends to be a bit more deer resistant. I have a friend who grows this in her garden, and she shared that information with me, and that is wonderful. Some boxwood. Now these are a great buy. It actually reads special buy $9.98. So if you're planning on doing like a low hedge, look at this. Green Mountain Boxwood. It says fall is for planting, and that is true. Now, most people, by the time the fall rolls around, they're done because they've done all of their gardening in the spring. But I will tell you that the fall is an excellent time to plant. Your soil is still nice and warm, which means that anything you plant will have the ability to develop some roots. There is generally more moisture, which means that that you will get some rain to water in your plants without you having to do too much extra watering. And it's also, there is less pest stress, right? Less heat stress. So overall, a great time to plant. And they also have some green velvet boxwood. So there's the green mountain and the green velvet. Now these are $9.98, a 1 gallon container. And they get to be 3 to 4 feet in height and 3 to 4 feet in width. And that is the same with the, well, this one gets a little bit larger. So the Green Mountain gets to be 4 to 5 feet in height, 2 to 3 feet in width, and is hardy down to a zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And the Green Velvet is a little bit hardier, down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Both of them are deer resistant. In general, boxwood is deer resistant, and they're also one of the few evergreens who can tolerate a little bit of shade. And some Alberta spruce. Now these are a more compact evergreen. They don't get very large. They grow in a pyramidal shape like you see here. They also like full sun. Now this size is the, let's see, 1.71 gallon for $32.98, and then they also have these little itty bitty ones for $14.98 that are a 2.9 quart. Now these look adorable in containers for the winter, and around the holidays you can even add some battery powered lights or even some solar lights to them to give them a little festive flair. And if you want something that is compact but an evergreen in your garden, these stay nice and small. So the size on these, once they mature, so anytime you see a tag, the size is going to be for a 10-year period. They get to be, in 10 years, 3 to 4 feet in height, 3 to 4 feet in width, and they are deer resistant. So they had the little giant Arborvitae that we just looked at in the 2 gallon container for $29.98, but they also have these here, the little giant Arborvitae in this 2.9 quart container for $11.98. Now what I love about these small containers is not only are they more affordable, but they also have a smaller root ball, which means they'll be a lot easier to plant. And Arborvitae, for the most part, they grow at a pretty decent rate. So even if you get a small one like this, within a couple of years, it's going to be a great size. So it's worth sometimes just getting them smaller. But if you want instant impact, go for the larger size. And check out these beautiful sedum. So this is a perennial that every fall garden should have. The pollinators absolutely love it, and you get such a long season of interest out of it. So it has these succulent-like leaves, these really thick stems, and they hold on to a lot of moisture, which means you don't have to water them too much. In fact, if you ever have sedums that split in the middle and splay on the ground, chances are they're getting too much water or they're not getting enough sun. They also love sun. So you give them a well-draining soil that leans dry and a lot of sun, and they are really happy, and they are just beautiful. And guess what? The best part? Late season clearance. So these are actually on sale. You can always tell here at Lowe's by the slash through the barcode, and it says clearance here. Now it depends on the price. For the most part, this time of year, they start going usually 50% off, but we will check out the clearance rack in a few minutes and see where they're at. And some catmint also on clearance. Now anything over $15 is usually 50% off. So this one here would be about $8. They're part of the mint family, so they have a minty fragrance, and the deer and rabbit stay away from it because they don't like the smell. These are covered in purple blooms in the spring, and sporadically they'll keep blooming all the way through the fall. Beautiful perennial. That sedum we just looked at $8.98 would be $4 according to the Lowe's clearance structure. And look what they have here on the clearance rack, Montauk daisies. Now this is another beautiful fall bloomer. So if you love the Shasta daisy that blooms in the summer, if you want a continuation of daisy blooms, plant some Montauk daisies. Now here's one tip I will give you about these. At some point around May, somewhere around Memorial Day, you want to go through and cut them back by about a third or even up to a half, depending how large yours is, because otherwise they tend to get really leggy and they can flop in the center. And to keep them nice and tight and compact, you want to do what's called a Chelsea chop at some point around Memorial Day. So before 4th of July, you want to cut them back, and that will delay blooming and you'll get a bushier, more compact plant. So these like full sun, they're an upright perennial, hardy down to zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and they get to be 24 to 36 inches in height and 18 to 24 inches in width. I also find them to be deer resistant in my garden. And so these at $17.98 would be 50% off, so they would be about $9. And some Spirea. These in fact are blooming. Look at this. They have a secondary flush of blooms. Typically these bloom in the spring. For me, my Spirea blooms in June. This is the Double Play Doozy by Proven Winners, and I believe this is a more compact variety. Let's look. Yep, 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, hardy in USDA growing zones 3 through 8 or down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. It likes sun or part shade. And look how pretty that looks when it's in full bloom. Isn't that beautiful? I really like Spireas. My favorite is the candy corn Spirea, but these are in a, let's see what size these are, a 2-gallon container for $27.98. And right beside them, they have some really pretty azaleas. Now these are a reblooming azalea, which is wonderful because typically azaleas will also bloom in the spring and then they will just have green, evergreen foliage and not bloom again. But the Perfectamundo Double Pink is a rebloomer. Look at that. And it has a bunch of buds and it's currently starting to bloom again. Let's see how large this one gets. 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, so nice and compact. And look when it's in bloom, it almost looks like a rose shrub. Hardy in zone 6B through 9 or down to -5 degrees Fahrenheit, and it likes sun or part shade. That's a real pretty one. Gorgeous. And this is almost a 2-gallon container for $27.98. Not only do they have the Perfectamundo Double Pink, but they also have the Double Purple. Look at that, so pretty. Grows similar size, 2.5 feet to 3 feet tall and wide, hardy in zone 6B through 9, reblooming and evergreen. So even when they're not blooming, you get these really beautiful shiny green leaves. And some more clearance, and these are topiary evergreens by Monrovia for 50% off. Now typically these topiaries are pretty pricey because someone has taken the time to grow these and to shape them. And so let's see how much they are. They're $199, 50% off, so these would be $100, so $99. What a great price. A pair of these in some containers by a front porch or entrance or by a garage would be really pretty. Look at that. Now these look like a type of Arborvitae. No, they're actually Leland cypress. Mint julep juniper. So there's a couple of varieties. So this is a juniper. They also have some Leland cypress. Yep, and Leland cypress. So there are 2 different varieties here, the juniper and the Leland cypress. Now you do want to make sure that you keep after this shape. So you do have to prune it or shape it pretty regularly. Otherwise it will start growing into just a regular tree shape. So if you want to keep it looking like a nice tight spiral topiary, just make sure you take your pruners anytime they start getting a little shaggy and give them a little trim. Look at this one. They even have what looks to be a boxwood. Yeah, a Green Mountain boxwood spiral topiary. Also $199 for the price would be 50% off at around $100. It's a little bit shorter than the evergreens, but also very pretty. Would look very nice in a container. And then they have this one that looks like a pom-pom style. Does it have a tag? No tag on this one. But this is a type of cypress as well. You can tell by the texture of the foliage. Very pretty. Oh, and a sea of gold juniper also trained into a topiary. So quite a few to choose from. So check out your stores, friends, because this is the time of year where all of the clearance is starting, and the fall is still, like I said, a perfect time to plant. So that's win-win. Good time to plant and clearance plants. Some of the Monrovia shrub roses are 50% off, and these look like a red rose, very healthy looking foliage, and still some buds on it. Let's see what these are called. Grace and Grit Red Shrub Rose. They like full sun. All roses like full sun and well-draining soil. They're also pretty drought tolerant once they're established. And this variety is hardy in zones 4 through 9 and down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it gets to be 4 feet wide, 5 feet tall. It says it's a well-behaved shrub. If you like a red rose, these are really pretty. And 50% off, they would be $44.98, so they'd be about $22.50. Another absolutely gorgeous shrub for the garden is a ninebark. Here it is native in the Northeast, so it gets a beautiful peeling bark in the winter, It has this beautiful deep dark foliage, which is such a nice contrast to all the green in the garden. And you get clusters of blooms in the spring that look like this. It makes the branches look like they're cascading and loaded with blooms. It's absolutely stunning. So this is the Summer Wine 9-bark by Proven Winners. The hardiness zones is USDA growing zones 3 through 7, or down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. It gets to be 5 to 8 feet tall and wide, and it says they are native, disease resistant, and compact, and it likes sun. It is a beauty. And look at that. These are 50% off. You can tell by that line through the barcode. So instead of $27.98, these would be $14. What a bargain for these beautiful shrubs. I have a tiny wine 9-bark and a ginger wine 9-bark, and I absolutely love them. Look at these blooms up close. Isn't that stunning? So pretty. Speaking of dark foliage shrubs, another beauty is this weigela here. This is the Wine and Roses by Proven Winners. I also have the Wine and Roses. It gets pretty tall at 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And it is hardy in USDA growing zones 4 through 8, or down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. I absolutely love it. And in the spring, it gets loaded with these pink bell-shaped blooms that almost look like penstemon blooms. Pollinators love them. The hummingbirds, when they show up right around the time that these bloom, and they love this shrub. Look at that, loaded with blooms. So pink blooms, dark foliage, gorgeous. And the weigela Wine and Roses is in a 2-gallon container for $27.98. And if you want some beautiful red berries in your winter landscape, you need a holly. Now, the great thing about hollies is that typically you need a male and a female plant in order for pollination to occur and for your holly to set berries. So the female will have the berries, but you need to have a male nearby. So either plant it in your garden, or maybe a neighbor has one, which will allow your female to be pollinated and set this beautiful red berry. However, they are now creating varieties that are hybrids. And so this one is a cross between a blue prince and a blue princess. It looks like there might be 2 in there. And so you only need this one shrub in order to get these beautiful berries. Really great that they're doing that now. So this here is a self-pollinating winterberry called Berry Magic Royalty. They're $52.98. And it reaches 8 to 10 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet wide, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, or zones 5 through 9. And another red berry. This is the winterberry called Wildfire by First Editions. It likes full sun, dark green foliage, and medium to high water needs. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, and it gets to be 8 to 10 feet high and 8 to 10 feet wide. It says it's moisture tolerant, which is excellent if you deal with an area of the garden that maybe holds on to a little too much water. And it's a great cut flower. In fact, every season as part of my garden club, we do a green sale, and one of the members has beautiful winterberry shrubs, and she cuts lots of branches for us to use in arrangements, and they're stunning. And the birds will feed off of them in the winter. So these First Editions 2-gallon containers are $27.98. And another really pretty variety of Spirea is this one here. It's called a birch leaf Spirea, and the foliage is a bit different than the other Spirea that we took a look at earlier. You can definitely see the difference when they're side by side. This is a real pretty one, and it's called the Pink Sparkler Birch Leaf Spirea, and this one is by First Editions. Gets to be 3 to 4 feet high, 3 to 4 feet wide. It likes full sun to part sun, and it is hardy in zones 3 through 8. And it also blooms, it looks like a bit of a lighter pink or white bloom. Has dark foliage for the new growth. Very pretty. And these are 2 gallons for $27.98. This is a side-by-side foliage comparison on the Spirea. So the double play doozy, you can see, has more of a pointed leaf. Okay, you can see that there. And the birch leaf Spirea has more of a rounded leaf. Okay, you can see that difference right there. And some gorgeous panicle hydrangeas. These are one of my favorite hydrangeas, the panicle, because I garden in a lot of sun, and these do wonderfully in sun. This variety is by First Editions, and it's called Little Hottie. And it's very similar to my Proven Winners Little Lime hydrangea in terms of their size and growth habit. So here is the information on the Little Hottie. You can see how beautiful and floriferous it is, loaded with those blooms. It gets these bright white blooms, and then as the temperatures get cooler at the later part of summer and into fall, they will start aging to beautiful shades of pink. You can actually see that here in the tag. Now, some areas in the south, sometimes these panicle hydrangeas don't change quite as well as some of the cooler gardening zones, but these are stunning. So they're a full sun to part shade shrub. They get to be 3 to 5 feet in height and 3 to 5 feet in width. And they are hardy in zones 3 through 8. The little haughty panicle hydrangea. So gorgeous. And the 2-gallon container is $28.98. Look at these adorable wooden reindeer. So last season I showed these in my Lowe's video and they sold out so fast. And here we are in the first week of October and they have already received them here at this Lowe's. They are adorable. So the larger one here is $34.98 and you can see that they're a wooden log reindeer and so cute. And then the smaller one is $24.98. Now I would say to use these in a covered porch or even indoors, more so than just to leave them exposed to the elements. If you were going to leave them outside, you probably should spray them with some kind of sealer, but they are so cute. So here we are in fall and they're already starting to get some of their holiday items. They have these adorable wooden logs. These are the birch bundles, $14.98. And then they also have these wooden holiday trees for $9.98, as well as these little bird houses that almost look like they could be an ornament, but perhaps you could hang them on a tree. And these are also $9.98. And a wooden snowman. And these hanging ornamental pine cones are also $12.98. Some more adorable and compact evergreens that grow in a ball or spherical shape. These are the Mr. Bowling Ball Arborvitae. And look at the shape of them and the color. These have a bit of a blue hint to them. Very pretty. There's the name, Mr. Bowling Ball Arborvitae, $16.98 for these 1-gallon containers. And they grow to be 24 to 30 inches in height, 24 to 30 inches in width, and they're hardy down to a zone 3. So very hardy, down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And some of the better boxwood is also now available at Lowe's. I had seen it recently at the Home Depot. They had a little bit smaller containers, but here they have these large, what looks to be a 2-gallon container for $29.98. Now, the good thing about these better boxwood is that they have been bred to be resistant to boxwood blight, which has been an issue that many people have had with boxwood in recent years. And they have a couple of different varieties. So they have the Babylon Beauty, which needs full sun to part sun, hardy in zones 5 through 9, and gets to be 3 high by 4 to 5 feet wide. Great for low hedging, mass planting, and foundation plantings, as well as containers. And you can shape them into a topiary ball. And then they also have this Skylight variety. It says it's very versatile, easy to shape, hedge, or topiary. 3 to 8 high and 3 to 4 feet wide. You can see there it says disease-resistant foundation plants. There's also one other type, I think it's called the Heritage, which I don't see here. I just see the Babylon Beauty and the Skylight variety. But this would be a great option if you've dealt with boxwood blight, but you want to have boxwood in your garden. The better boxwood could be a good option. And some rhododendron. So if you're looking ahead to spring to get through those cold winter months, a rhododendron is a great evergreen. It has this broad, shiny green foliage and these really pretty clusters of blooms in the spring. And this variety by Proven Winners, I actually just added one to my garden this season, the Dandy Man Color Wheel. So pretty. It changes through multiple colors, the blooms. So it tells you right here that it will start pink. It says flowers start red, open to deep pink, and finally turn bright white. So never a dull moment with the Dandy Man Color Wheel rhododendron. It is hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Gets to be 4 to 8 feet tall and wide, and it wants 4 to 6 hours of sun per day. So in general, rhododendrons are understory trees, so they like to grow under the canopy of larger trees or deciduous trees. So in the winter months, they'll get a little bit more light, and then during the hottest part of the year, once those trees above fill out, they will get shaded. And you can see that this one already has such large bloom buds. Now I will tell you that the deer in my garden do like to eat these buds. So if you plant one of these and you deal with deer, you'll have to spray them with a deer and rabbit repellent over those winter months so that you can enjoy these blooms in spring. The Dandy Man Color Wheel Rhododendron is a 2-gallon container for $32.98. And the Sprinter Boxwood, which is a really popular hedging boxwood by proven winners. They have some here at Lowe's. These are also deer resistant, as are most boxwood. They are hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and they get to be 2 to 4 feet tall and wide. Fast growing and evergreen, and no fragrance, because that is another thing that boxwood have. Sometimes people associate certain varieties with smelling like cat urine. This one does not have a scent. I have smelled it before. Perfectly good. And you can see there how it looks growing in the landscape. And still lots of beautiful and colorful fall annuals. Here they have some croton, which is actually a tropical plant. So after the weather starts getting a little too cool, you can bring this inside and grow it as a house plant. And the croton containers here are, let's see, $22.98. They look really pretty in a fall display with some pumpkins and even some mums, which Lowe's still has plenty of mums in stock. 6 to 8 inch containers of mums look like they are $6.98. And if you are going to buy mums, it might be really tempting to buy them in this form when they're all blooming, or even like this when some are in bloom and some are not. But my personal preference and what my recommendation would be is to buy them in tightly budded form, just like this, where they're just starting to crack bloom. That way you can enjoy them for the longest amount of time. They're also pretty thirsty plants, but the best way to water them would be to sit them in a bucket or tray of water and let them sop up that water from the bottom, so bottom watering. Because if they get watered from the top, either by the rain pummeling them or from the hose, they can sometimes get a hole in the top and not look as nice. So definitely bottom watering is best for mums. Well, that brings us to the end of the October inventory here at Lowe's. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these plants near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.